You recently said something that really resonated with me, about how, with more and more time, or as more time goes on. Sorry. Okay, the more time goes by, and I'm reluctant to say this, but I believe it is true. The Israelis look like the Nazis. Their rhetoric, their behavior, it's truly appalling. A Jewish state is behaving like the Nazis did. So, can you talk about this evolution? Why you say that? What the parallels are that stand out to you? And when you started thinking this way?
Well, I think that when the war first broke out on October 7th, for about the first 2 months, I did not think it was a genocide. I thought there was no question that the Israelis were committing war crimes, but I didn't think it was a genocide. Uh, but I think by mid-December of 2023, it was becoming clear to me that it was a genocide. And of course, as you remember, I think it was December 31st of 2023. I think that's when South Africa filed its brief with the International Court of Justice. Uh, and I read that brief, and then I watched what was going on, and I was convinced that it was a genocide, and I've thought so since. But as time has gone by and I've watched this genocide evolve, the more I am reminded of what the Nazis did in World War II. This is the period 1941 to 1945. And I actually teach on the Holocaust. I give lectures on it, and I've done an enormous amount of research. At one point, I thought about writing a book on it. So I know quite a bit about it. I haven't done a lot of research in recent years, but I know the case quite well. And when you sort of look at the Israelis, the parallels are quite striking. First of all, just the rhetoric, and this was evident on October 7th and shortly after October 7th. And one could argue there was evidence of this kind of rhetoric even before October 7th. But it seems to me that if you listen to Israeli leaders talking after October 7th, they sound hardly different from the Nazis at all. The things that they say are just reprehensible, shocking. It's hard to believe that the Jews, and of course Israelis are Jews, would say such a thing, given what the Germans said back in the day. And the second thing is, before the Holocaust got started, really the planning was set in place in the spring, late winter, early spring of 1941. The Germans were not sure what exactly they were going to do with the Jews, and they had this plan called the Madagascar Plan, which was to move the Jews to Africa. And you have Jews today, Israelis today, talking about moving the Palestinians to Africa. And you just sort of scratch your head and say, boy, I've heard that one before, right? And then if you look at the pictures, especially the starving children, if that doesn't remind you of Auschwitz, or not only the death camps, but the concentration camps that were inside Germany, it just, the pictures look so similar to the pictures that have survived from the Holocaust that I think you can't help but think that, this is a very similar situation. And then this is not exactly on the genocide, but, I was talking about Lebensraum before, and a number of people have now begun to talk about Lebensraum. You want to remember
Yeah.
with regard to the Germans in World War II, when they invaded the Soviet Union, they were not only talking about murdering huge numbers of people, and it's very important to emphasize here that they murdered more non-Jews than they murdered Jews. I mean, this was a murderous regime like we've never seen before, in my opinion. And you want to remember that the official number that the Soviets give for Soviet citizens who died in World War II is 27 million. 27 million. And I would estimate that about 8 million of those casualties are military, or those deaths. So 8 million of the 27 million, that's telling you that probably 19, 18, 17 million civilians were killed, right? And my estimate is that roughly 1 million of those Soviet citizens who were murdered were Jews, because most of the Jews were in Poland and in Romania/Hungary. But anyway, I'm just telling you, this was an incredibly murderous regime. And not only was it a murderous regime, it was interested in creating Lebensraum. I mean, they talked openly about that. And when you watch what the Israelis are doing, the wanton murder, right? Of course, they're murdering the Palestinians, and this is a genocide. And I would not argue that what's happening in Lebanon or Syria, or with regard to Iran, is a genocide. That's not a genocide, period. End of story. But nevertheless, the wanton killing of civilians in those countries by the Israelis is shocking to me. And I'm a good old-fashioned realist. It's not like I'm some pussycat, right? I understand that international politics is a rough and tumble business. But when you watch what the Israelis are doing in terms of just killing civilians and carving out Lebensraum in countries like Syria, countries like Lebanon, and so forth and so on, and just all the horrible, absolutely horrible things that are happening in Gaza, and to some lesser extent, in the West Bank, it certainly does look like the Germans.
Yeah, and lest people think that you're taking this too far, this is a Times of Israel post that was deleted, but this is from 2024, and it says Lebensraum needed for Israel's exploding population. Israel's population is projected to grow to 11.1 million by 2030. 13.2 million by 2040 and 15.2 million by 2048. That's why hanging on to the West Bank is such a contentious issue. Lebensraum. These people need places to live in a nation short of land mass. Compare Israel to its neighbor, Jordan. It goes on and on. Now, this was deleted, but it was also written, and deleting just shows that there's good damage control. Here's something from 2014, also from Times of Israel, when genocide is permissible. So again, this can be, like we were talking before, sometimes these things are useful. They're clarifying. It's so that's why also they can be deleted. But the idea that that the lesson of the Holocaust is being perpetrated against Palestinians. I mean, the idea that never again somehow means, I mean, well, we know what it means. It means never again to a certain group of people and whatever it takes to another group of people. But what I think is so interesting about this whole question of what's rational is that it can really get to what the goal of a state or a government are, right? So sometimes things don't look rational to us, but that's only because we think that the ultimate goal is something that it may not be. So if the goal of Israel is to keep Jews safe, let's say, I don't think that Israel is a rational project for many reasons. I mean, we've talked about the Hannibal Directive, the treatment of the hostages, the way that they are. I would say Israel is creating. I mean, what can create more anti-Semitism than claiming that you are acting in the name of Jews as you live stream a genocide? But it's not rational if that's the goal. But then if it is more of if it is a much more aggressive, ambitious project, then it is more rational, right? So you can almost you can almost work backwards and figure out what the real goals of a government are by looking at what they're doing. That
Yeah.
can you can see through the lie. You get to see the difference between what the claims are and what the realities are.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're basically saying what I was saying about, what is rational and what is not rational. You can
Right.
have an absolutely horrible goal and be very rational in your pursuit of that goal.
Right.
Uh, and that doesn't mean you're behaving morally. It just means that you're behaving strategically.
Right.
And again, as I said before, Adolf Hitler was a uh, he was a remarkably smart strategist. He made mistakes, and thankfully, he made the ultimate mistake of invading the Soviet Union. But he was not a fool, and that's what made him so dangerous. Uh, but I want to make another point based on what you were saying when you were reading from that. I think it was the article about Lebensraum, where Israel has this exploding population.
Right.
First of all, Israel, in my opinion, probably has about this is inside Greater Israel today. You have probably about 7.3 million Palestinians and about 7.3 million Jews. And if they expel all the Palestinians like they want to, you probably have 7.3 million Jews. But the other question you have to ask yourself is what's going to happen to all those Israeli Jews over time? How many are going to stay there? Uh, how many have already left? How many will leave when the shooting stops? I mean, what is the future of Israel? And I would argue it's not a very bright future. I talked about the fault lines inside the society before and what that means for the future. I think all of this war, it really spooks people. And when you see that you have neighbors that have missiles that can hit you, and you get into, fights like the fight that the Israelis just got into with the Iranians, you want to ask yourself, what are the consequences of that for the population? Will people leave? Are people going to go to Israel? I wouldn't bet a lot of money on that. And I wouldn't be surprised if a good number of people leave because they just don't feel safe there. And by the way, we were talking about the possibility of Iran getting nuclear weapons. What if Iran gets nuclear weapons and at the same time, Israel and Iran continue to have poisonous relations between the two countries? Uh, would you want to live in Israel? I'm not sure about that. It's the size of a postage stamp. And you have this country, Iran, and we're hypothesizing that it might have a couple nuclear weapons. This is not a good situation. Uh, and anyway, I think that if you look at this country, it does not have a bright future. Now,
Right.
I think that Benjamin Netanyahu would disagree with that. And he would tell people that if you follow my policies and the Americans support us hook, line, and sinker, we're going to create a greater Israel and live happily ever after. But I
Right.
don't think so.
So it's kind of his mistake, his strategic mistake. You think is relying on the goodwill or the unwavering support of the West? Because part of me thinks maybe it is rational because no one is standing up to this starvation, to this like genocidal behavior that invokes so many comparisons to the Holocaust. And I have to say that I'm working on this documentary about Holocaust survivors speaking out against the genocide, and I've interviewed people who are survivors, the children of survivors, but also people who are just involved in uh, the Middle East. And I interviewed Daniel Levy the other day, who used to be an Israeli negotiator. He's English, but he spent a lot of time in Israel. And he said that, he used to always avoid comparisons between the Nazis and Israelis, and that is very forbidden, verboten, right? Israel, you're not allowed to do that. Only Israel can weaponize the Holocaust. No one else can use it. So they get to call other people Nazis. They get to call Hamas Nazis, but you can't make any parallels. But what Daniel Levy said was that it's almost like Israel is daring people to compare them to the Nazis with their actions.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. I think the key piece here, by the way, I mean, I've read a number of pieces by Daniel, and I know him quite well and
Yeah.
have great respect for him. But the key piece is the writings, or the key pieces of the writings of Omer Bartov.
Yeah.
who is an Israeli by birth, served in the IDF, and has been a historian of the Holocaust at Brown University for a long time. I actually have taught his books over time in my classes, and he is highly regarded. And he has said that he believes that what the Israelis are doing is a Holocaust or is a genocide.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, has had a big impact. And of course, all sorts of individuals and organizations with real standing, like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, various people in the United Nations have said that this is a Holocaust or a genocide. And so I think that label is now beginning to stick in ways that leaves many Israelis, and certainly the Israeli government, very uncomfortable. And they'll go to great lengths to cut against that. But the more this goes on, the more difficult that becomes. And you want to remember here, we just want to think about this just when we're assessing the strategy. What's the ending here?
Yeah.
How does this end? Uh, I'm hoping every day, I hope that Trump moves in and says enough is enough. And the Israelis are forced to accept a ceasefire and supply trucks flow into Gaza. Let's assume that happens. Uh, that would be wonderful in a certain sense, but at the same time, it hardly goes anyways towards solving the basic problem. These people have no homes. Gaza's been made unlivable. They really have no place to go unless the Madagascar option is realized. And I don't think that's going to happen either. But what's the end result here? And, the Israelis don't like the idea of having 7.3 million Palestinians in their midst. Okay, but you can't get rid of them. Therefore, you have 7.3 million Palestinians inside your borders, and those people are living in the most horrible of conditions. What does this mean? The world is going to mobilize against you. Maybe the US government will protect you and it will limit the leverage of the so called international community. But nevertheless, the consequences for your country are going to be horrific, right? You're going to be, the moral stain on your reputation is going to be huge. And what does that mean for people who live inside Israel? And furthermore, just to take this a step further, because we want to think about where this train is headed, what about the lobby? The lobby is already overexposed from its own point of view. It's out in the open. It's playing smash mouth politics. It's acting in ways that are fundamentally at odds with basic American values like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. Is the lobby going to be forced to continue acting this way for year after year? This will be disastrous for the United States. This is a terrible situation inside the United States. The situation with the lobby is terribly unhealthy for liberal America. And I don't mean liberal in the sense of a liberal Democratic Party. I mean liberal in the Lockean sense of the term, liberal in the sense that we're all part of a liberal society. Having the lobby, act the way it's been acting in recent years for the foreseeable future would be disastrous. So if you sort of think about where we are and how we get out of this, I don't see any solution at all. And I think pursuing Netanyahu's policies just make the situation worse. But again, if you go to I think vast majority is probably too strong a word, but the clear majority of Israel's supporters in the United States, and tell them that we're in a terrible situation, they would agree. And if you say, how do we get out of it? They would say, more force, more force. Just, pound the Palestinians, pound Israel's neighbors. That's the solution. And I've long ago come to the conclusion that there are real limits to what you can do in any situation like this with military force. But Israel and its supporters, they reject that line of argument. They think that you can solve political problems with the big stick, with the iron wall, with military force. But I
Right.
don't think so.
Yeah, the Iron Wall, of course, which is of course, reminds one of Jabotinsky, who's another Texas Chainsaw Massacre type of leader who, again, in a very refreshing, clarifying way, said the quiet part out loud. Israel is a colonial project. I mean, he talked about how natives always resist colonizers, and he was referring to the Palestinians and the Israelis. He wasn't obviously being critical; he was embracing it. He and the other revisionist Zionists were, in some ways, it's much easier to deal with because you know what you are dealing with. But so I mean, if we look at history though as an example, like will Israel be just fine as long as it doesn't try to invade Western Europe or Eastern Europe?
Well, it's not going to be just fine. It's
Not stopped, I should say.
it's at war with a handful of its neighbors. It's a highly aggressive state, prone to violence, and there's no evidence that that's going to change. It has this huge looming problem with Iran. It has powerful centrifugal forces at play inside the body politic. And I believe the situation with the lobby here in the United States is not sustainable over the long term. I think now that what the lobby does is out in the open, and now that the lobby's playing smash mouth politics, that this can't go on forever. And so I think, again, I think Israel is in real trouble.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope so. I mean, I hope it's to me, it's just like whether it will be stopped. When will it be stopped? What will it take for it to be stopped? Some kind of domestic pressure on the West that makes the West finally pull the plug on it.
I don't know. I don't. Your question is a great question, and
Requires
you and, I,
clairvoyance. Right?
you and I are on the same wavelength. So I think about that question all the time. Lots of people ask me that question, and what I really wish is I wish that I had a happy story to tell you. I
Right.
wish I could say, Katie, listen, I think these two things are going to happen over the course of the next year, and then this situation is going to come to an end. I mean, to be very honest, find it hard to believe that the genocide in Gaza continues. I just can't believe it, especially now that we have all these pictures of
Yeah.
starving children. You just sort of shake your head and say, how can this be? How can people not shut this one down?
Right.
Uh, and I mean, it's not like Israel is that powerful vis-a-vis the West, and especially the
Right.
United States. We have tremendous leverage here. You want to remember, as we talked about before, President Trump, the day before he became President Trump, sent Steve Witkoff to the Middle East. This is January 19th, to effect a ceasefire, right? Because Trump didn't want what was going on in Gaza to be going on January 20th. So they shut it down. And it looked like there was a pretty good ceasefire agreement that might form the basis of a lasting agreement, or an agreement that would last for maybe a couple of years. But that all went up in smoke quite quickly. And here we are. But anyway, I can't. I'm sad to say I can't tell a
Yeah.
happy story.
Well, Brad brought up this image. Speaking of the greater Israel, saying the quiet part out loud. Here's an image of Netanyahu. Oops, with the new Middle East. And Brad, what do you want to say about this?
Just about, it just reminded, this image came to mind when Dr. Mearsheimer was, speaking about the Lebensraum, just the greater colonization. And it was just remarkable to me, at least, that I believe this was September 2023, that Netanyahu felt comfortable enough to present this to the United Nations. And as a little less substantial aside, I'm actually not at home now. I'm visiting my dad, and he and I went to see the Superman movie yesterday evening. This literally is in the movie. Like, the villain literally shows a map. I mean, they're fictitious places,
Right.
but it was hard for me not to be like, oh my God, this is literally like what we talk about on the show all the time.
Yeah. People are very angry about it, apparently.
Oh, jeez.
About Superman.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Well, I just wanted to show one clip just to kind of remind people what we're talking about, to ground it in reality. So here is a clip of Cindy McCain, who is talking about the death and destruction that is being experienced in Palestine right now. And this is interesting because, of course, she's this is the widow of the late John McCain. She's not someone who's particularly a bleeding heart liberal. Doesn't come from a particularly humanitarian tradition. You know, her husband joked around saying "bomb, bomb, 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 bomb Iran." But it is interesting and significant that this in this CNN interview with Cindy McCain, where she talks about the recent massacre of Palestinians, I think we should just watch this so people are reminded of what's at stake right now.
This is one of the worst tragedies we've seen so far in this particular war. What happened was we had clearance to go through the Zakim gate. We were through the gate. The Israelis had, as you know, they clear everything and they decide when and if you go in. And we began our trek down the road, and what we saw were thousands of people running towards us. And they were hungry, they're starving. And all of a sudden, the Israeli tanks, Israeli guns, Israeli weapons from all kinds started firing on the crowd. And it was it's something that I hope never happens again. But more importantly, our group, WFP, our people that work for us were there too, and they were put in grave danger as a result of that. No humanitarian aid worker should ever be a target of anything.
Well, this follows a trend over the last 2 months where over 800 Palestinians have been killed around aid distribution sites. The majority of those are at the controversial US-backed and Israel-supported Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Can you be very specific? Are you coordinating in any way or supporting in any way that operational model? And what is your view on the GHF?
Well, we are not coordinating, and we do not work with GHF. As you know, we're a UN agency, and so we have our UN, the way the UN operates is different from what GHF is doing. I don't really have any information about them at all because we don't even talk.
And that, of course, is the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, which isn't just a fake aid organization in that it doesn't provide aid, but it is so much more sinister than that. It is actually luring people to their deaths. I mean, that is one of the things that I can't get out of my mind. I mean, how diabolical this is. And it's with the help of, U.S. contractors. And they are luring people to their deaths with the promise of food. And as Gabor Mate pointed out in an interview he did in a forthcoming podcast, this is something that we saw in the Holocaust. Nazis would lure the Jews out of the concentration camps, onto the trains with promises of food. I'm sorry, out of the ghettos onto the trains towards the concentration camps with promises of food.
Yeah, it's well, Norman Finkelstein makes the point, and I know enough about the Holocaust that I believe he's right. And he, of course, knows more than I do. But his point is that what is quite different between the Holocaust and what the Israelis are doing is that the Germans, by and large, did not do it gleefully. They were aware that they should hide what they were doing. In a very important way, they knew they were doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Those are my words, but there was no real glee here. They felt like they just had a job to do.
Right.
And I'm not justifying what they
No,
did for
right.
1 second. But in the case of the Israelis, there are just all sorts of videos that are shocking because you see that they're just killing Palestinians like it's a sport, like it's a game. They're having fun.
Yeah.
It's just hard to believe what's going on. But just back to Cindy McCain. My question is, why aren't there more people like Cindy McCain? This is what I don't understand for the life of me. You know, this is the year 2025. Given where we are, you would not expect that the body politic in the West or the various body politics in Western countries would allow this to go on. It's so shocking. I can't figure it out. What's going on here? How could Joe Biden and Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan allow this to go on? These are people who view themselves as liberal Democrats,
Right.
believe in human rights. How could they do this? Even Donald Trump. Okay, Donald Trump's not a liberal Democrat, but doesn't his sense of decency just tell him that you can't do this? But anyway, the number of people who are speaking out down below is very great.
Right.
You and I are two examples of that. But the number of people in the upper echelons who are speaking out and doing something about this is remarkably small. And I honestly don't understand it at all. I just find it hard to believe that people haven't shut this one down.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is unbelievable, and it's painful to think about. And I mean, just the slow motion killing of children. I mean, because they're the ones who are most vulnerable to starvation. And it just is like, what was the point of never again? What was the point of all these lessons that we subject children to if it's just going to be applied again, just to a different population, which coincidentally had nothing to do with the Holocaust? I mean, it'd be one thing if this were being done to Germans, not all Germans, John, of course. But it would be one thing if this were being done to Germans, which I would oppose, but there would be a coherence to it, right? But doing it to Palestinians who had absolutely nothing to do with this is just, it's stunning. And as you referred to, and Norman Finkelstein has referred to this, it's kind of like the opposite of the banality of evil that Arendt talks about.
Yeah.
It's like the gleeful execution of evil.
Yeah. Exactly. That I like that language. It's not the banality of evil. And again, that's, as you well know, not to justify anything.
Oh, no, not at all. Right. It's just a different shade of it. I mean, it's like, but it is the opposite. It's not the mechanization and the depersonalization of it and the distance from it. It's the glee and the documentation.
Yeah.
So.
But, if you think about the creation of Israel, going back to what we were talking about before, there were hardly any Jews in what was Palestine around 1900. And those Jews who were in Palestine were not Zionists.
Right.
And when the Zionists came, and this gets back to your comments about Jabotinsky, they understood full well they were going to have to do horrible things to the Palestinians. There's just no way you create a Jewish state in a sea of Palestinians without doing horrible things to the Palestinians. And this has gone on and on and on for many, many decades, for well over a century now.
Right.
And in the process, you've dehumanized the Palestinians to the point where it's rather easy to get into a situation where murdering them is acceptable.
Right.
By the way, to go back to the Germans, you had a similar situation with regard to how they talked about Jews.
Yeah.
And not only Jews, it's how they talked about Poles, how they
Right.
talked about Slavs, how they talked about the Roma, and
Right.
so forth and so on. They dehumanized people. They
Right.
were animals. They're grasshoppers. And when you dehumanize people, and you do this for, huge periods of time, it becomes easy to then go out and murder them because you don't think you're killing human beings.
Right.
You're killing subhumans. And
Right.
this is obviously what's going on here.
Yeah. But then on top of that is that the pathological, they all want to kill us, you say, as you are literally wiping them out. So it's like almost it's such a sick combination of dehumanization while also playing the victim at the same time, which is totally exonerating. You can do whatever you want if you claim that you're in fear, living in fear, or this the myth of self-defense, as if any of this is self-defense. Like you just have to starve children to defend yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. You've been, as always, so generous with your time.